Hello, I'm Amy from moonmindology.com, and today I want to look at the chart of NATO. So NATO has been in the news quite a lot recently as part of the arguments between Ukraine and Russia involve NATO, and that's caused tensions. So some say that NATO is no longer necessary, but others believe that it is and it should be expanded. So let's look into the nature of NATO as well as the forecast for this treaty. The ascendant is in Leo and the sun, the chart ruler, goes to the 8th house, and the sun is all about the heart, and the ascendant is deeply linked to the most important thing that you prioritize. So looking at the nation as a whole, you can see what it's built on, and it's greatly linked to the 8th house. It's research, science, and most of all, secrets. So NATO does conduct research, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some secrets about the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There is also an element of benefiting from the money of others with this as well. So Venus is exalted in the 8th, which is really great for charm, and it pulls nations and people towards it. And this is why people think that this treaty is a great idea. It is also great for accumulating wealth from others, and it's very good for science and research, as I said. So this is also good for relationships because of the power of Venus. But there is a slight problem here. Venus is completely surrounded by malefics, and this can make the planet somewhat weak. The 10th ruler is in the 8th, which is all about science, research and investigation. So there may be some connection to secret fields like the CIA or MI5 or something just secretive. There's a lot of signs that this is the case. So this is also another sign that insurances and other people's money can be brought into the treaty as well. The 3rd ruler is in the 8th, and that can indicate a lack of siblings. So there's a possibility that there is nothing like NATO. And I don't think there is something that's quite like this treaty. Mars is in the 8th house, and this can create problems with relationships. So this is contradictory to Venus, which creates lots of ups and downs based on what planets are being activated at the time. So Mars is surrounded by good planets. So this is good for making money, but it can also be good for weapons and, of course, competition. But there can be problems with accidents. The 4th ruler is in the 8th. And this can create problems with security and other fixed assets. So Mars and Venus are in a planetary war. And let me remind you that the astrological straw that broke the proverbial camel's back with Russia and Ukraine was a planetary war between Mars and Venus in Capricorn. So this can bring contention and violence when it is activated. Mercury is debilitated in the 8th, which can create communication issues, and there can be problems with being misunderstood. But there can also be phobias, hysteria, as well as problems with other people's money and difficulty with insurances. I would wonder whether this is a link to having difficulty getting members to pay exactly the amount they are meant to. So Mercury does get Nichabanga in this position, but it does still remain a very weak planet. The ruler of the 2nd in the 8th brings money from others via investments and sometimes even questionable means. And there can be secrets and scandals in the early years of existence. The ruler of the 11th is in the 8th, which is problematic for friends and associates, and they can turn when you least expect it. So it can be betrayals, and there's plenty of money made from others and via insurances. So 11th house is large amounts of money. Neptune is in the 2nd, and this can bring mysteries around finances, and they may find that money disappears. So that can be money wasted, or it's even disappearing under mysterious circumstances. There can be misunderstandings with communications and speech as well. And as this is the first part of the existence and Neptune is here, this is yet another sign that in the early days of NATO, there was something mysterious or scandalous, Or there could have just been things occurring behind the scenes that we did not know about. Well, I didn't know about it because I wasn't alive. The ruler of the 8th is in the 6th, which is a Viparita yoga, and that can bring accidents as well as lawsuits and problems with tenants and servants. And I would also say that this may bring issues with those who pay money in as well. So there can be deception and problem from people who work within NATO, but there can be gains through these misfortunes. Jupiter is in the 6th house and it's debilitated, and this can bring problems with legal issues as well as problems with luck and fortune as well. And the judgment is very questionable with this combination if this was to be a human. So the ruler of the 5th is in the 6th, and this can create issues with real estate and public happiness. So seeing as the 5th is a blessed house and it goes to a Dastana, this is not the greatest thing for sound advice and harmony. Rahu is in the 11th house, which does give great interest in philosophy and religion. And I would say that NATO as a whole is really interested in expanding into as much foreign territory as possible. However, the 9th house is also law and guidance. So there can be an element of extreme leaders, but there can also be problems with travel and foreigners. The 9th house usually rules the father, and the father would be the leader. And this can bring extreme leaders who are overbearing or mostly concerned with material success. Ketu is in the 3rd house, and that can create losses around siblings. So as before, there's nothing quite like NATO. And perhaps if somebody was to start up another alliance like this, there could be a chance that they would not get very far and it would either go up in flames or just not be in existence. I do find that the 3rd can also be borders. So there can be an element of confusion as to where borders are exactly. Ketu aspects the moon, and that can create more confusion around security and happiness. And I have sometimes seen this combination in mental disorders as well, which does add to the idea of hysteria. And Uranus is closely conjunct, so this can create similar problems with erratic thought patterns. And the very mindset of NATO is paranoia. If you think about what it's all about, it's nuclear. So this can be really ramped up during dashas of Moon and Mercury. The Moon is in the 11th, which can give famous and renowned contacts and friends. And this house is all about groups and associates. However, the Moon can be unstable, so there can be problems which do relate to miscommunications. And I mentioned that previously. This is great for wealth though, as well as speculation and investments. Uranus is in the 11th, which can give sudden changes with friends or associates. And this is also a sign that friends aren't as supportive as they could be, which doesn't sound great, seeing as this is meant to be an alliance. Pluto is in the 12th, which is actually all about letting go of power and control. This doesn't seem to be a very good combination for the alliance, which is all about protecting from nuclear. And Pluto is nuclear, but it could also mean that this treaty is a deterrent, and it puts Pluto-related problems into the past. And that would actually make a treaty very effective just by that one placement, potentially. So Saturn is in the 1st house, which gives great seriousness and focus. And this is about order, organisation and structure, which can give NATO a leadership quality as well as it adds up with the character of this entity. So there's an opposition aspect to the 7th house, which can create problems with contracts and relationships, unfortunately. The ruler of the 6th is in the 1st, and this gives more discipline, more focus, more desire for competition, but there can be disagreements in the workplace, also legal problems, which we've already seen pop up. The ruler of the 7th is in the 1st, which makes relationships very, very important. And of course, this adds up. NATO is all about alliances and relationships. Overall, this is an entity that is very interested in relationships and science. However, it's a pretty bad alliance, as I don't think if NATO really had to kick in and work together, you would ever get anyone to agree. Not only that, they're legally pretty weak and tend to have extreme people in charge. Overall, it seems to be that all NATO actually does, according to this chart, is collect money. And even then, it's not that great at collecting money, as people duck and dive out of it. So if this chart is right, and NATO is just a very glamorous R&D group that just develops weapons, there's no security to actually be found in this alliance, and it's absolutely money and lip service. However, with Pluto in that 12th house, it really could just be a deterrent that seems to work more by just being there. So if that is the case, why do countries have to give so much money to it? Why can it not just be, I don't know, an agreement, something there to stop people behaving in such a way? NATO was in the dasha of K2 Venus, which can really ramp up that planetary war, and the 8th house. K2 can cause border problems as well, and this was all during the time that aggression started to take place between Russia and Ukraine. This, of course, was occurring on the borders of NATO countries. And if you remember back in 2021, there were problems with people crossing the Belarus border into Poland en masse, and provisions had to be put in place, and NATO was involved. Just last week, the dasha changed to K2 Sun, and there's still going to be border issues, as well as the 8th and 3rd houses being activated. And the only thing that it could do is potentially affect NATO as an entity itself. But it could be a good time for the NATOs to focus on research. In October, it will move into the subdasha of the moon, so that can add to quibbles and overconnections with groups and friendships. In October, it will move into the subdasha of the moon, and that can add quibbles over connections with groups and friendships. And this could be a pretty unstable time for NATO. So if we look at the transits for the next year, Pluto's going to be going through the 6th house and travelling over Jupiter, so there could be some problems behind the scenes, and more of the same throughout the next year. Neptune is in Pisces, and this can create a lot of confusion and illusions around what NATO are actually up to, but I don't think that's really going to be majorly impactful until 2028, when it could cause a few problems. Uranus is in the 9th house, and it has been for quite a few years, and this can cause a lot of changes with laws and leaders. And Uranus is going to be leaving the sun this year, so there could be a reputation change coming up in the next few years. Jupiter and Rahu are also here, which can really make these changes quite significant, and Rahu will be changing into the 8th house in November, so there could be some scandal that's about to hit. Saturn is in the 7th house, which can create limitations and problems with contracts as well as relationships. And K2 is very important because it's currently in the 3rd house of borders, so there could be some sense of loss over the borders. See, this is interesting as NATO has gained Finland, but it seems to be at some kind of loss, and I'm not sure if there's something else going on behind the scenes. So after November, K2 will be moving into the 2nd house, which can be a little bit problematic for security, as well as there could be a loss of money. And there could be a reduction in donations, or someone could leave NATO. And this could potentially happen in May. And it could be a country or a leader that has a Pisces ascendant. Or I could be wrong on that. But predictions are pretty fun, so why not? I hope you've enjoyed my analysis of NATO. I love to see your comments, so please leave me one if you're thinking about it. Please like and subscribe if you like my content, and of course you can go to my website for an appointment if you want a reading with me. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.